My name is James. I'm 24 years old, born and raised in the United States, and during this story, I was living in a small apartment in Sacramento, California. At that time, I was a college student, broke but hopeful, juggling classes, part-time work, and the messy journey of figuring life out. This isn't a tale about glory or violence. It's a story about quiet loyalty, anger held like ice instead of fire, and the moment I realized protecting the people I love sometimes means choosing the unexpected path. This is the story of how one act of cruelty sparked a silent revenge, and how I delivered justice without ever raising a hand. Back when the internet buzzed with hope instead of noise, I was just another college kid trying to figure life out at a small community college, juggling textbooks, cheap cafeteria food, and dreams bigger than my budget. Days felt simple, nights felt full, and I believed good people always stayed safe, and bad ones always got what they deserved. I had just moved in with my girlfriend Lucy, hoping shared rent would mean shared peace. The apartment was tiny, the walls thin, but somehow it felt big enough for our laughter, our late-night ramen dinners, and the future we thought we were stitching together. We had mismatched furniture, thrift store curtains, and hearts full of optimism, convinced love and ambition could turn scarcity into something like comfort. One evening, Lucy told me a friend from her class would join us for game night. I figured why not? College nights were built on board games, cheap snacks, and strangers becoming friends. When Sarah walked through the door, it felt like fate winking. She and I recognized each other from high school, not close back then, but familiar enough to share a grin and fall into easy conversation like we'd never missed a beat. That night turned out great. Laughter rolling like thunder through our cramped apartment, dice clattering, someone booing dramatically at a bad card draw. Sarah blended in effortlessly, her energy sparking through conversations, turning strangers into a little chosen family for a few hours. It was one of those nights where time felt soft, generous, like the universe was saying, "Yeah, this is good. Remember this." After that, Sarah became a regular at our place. Movie nights, dinners, lazy afternoons when college felt too heavy and friendship felt like relief. She even brought her boyfriend Jay a couple times, though he never fit the rhythm. He sat like a shadow in a room full of lanterns. Quiet, stiff, always seeming annoyed just to exist near us, like joy offended him somehow. We invited Jay only out of politeness, because kindness felt like the gentle thing to do. But even then, he answered warmth with cold glances, small smiles with tight jaws. Eventually, he stopped coming, always finding excuses, and honestly, none of us mourned the absence. The room felt lighter without him, conversations flowed smoother, and Sarah seemed happier too, or so we thought. Then one night, Sarah called Lucy crying. Her voice cracked through the phone like it had been holding back a storm for hours. Without hesitation, we told her to come over. When she arrived, eyes swollen and breath shaking, the air in the room shifted. Comfort scattered. Worry rose like cold fog curling around the walls, and I knew something heavy had followed her to our door. She told us Jay accused her of cheating just because she spent time with us. Jealousy twisting into poison fast. Words turned ugly, sharp enough to bruise her spirit. And then, when she tried to leave, he shoved her. She fell, crashing over a coffee table, pain marking her in ways no apology could erase. Hearing it lit a fire in my chest, one that burned hotter than shock, fiercer than fear. Sarah insisted it was just an accident, a moment of anger, a slip. But bruises don't lie, and fear doesn't bloom without cause. I wasn't built for violence, never been in a fight, never wanted to be that kind of man. But hurting my friends, hurting her, that lit something inside me. I didn't want to swing fists. I wanted justice to sting sharper than knuckles ever could. At the time, I worked in the admin building, just a student job pushing papers and answering phones. But that job came with access, records, schedules, system IDs, information most people couldn't touch. And as anger simmered into something colder, steadier, I realized I didn't need to throw a punch. I just needed to pull the right thread in the right place. College had deadlines, dates where dropping a class meant nothing, and missing one meant consequences. Jay, foreign student, tied to his enrollment like oxygen to lungs. If he wasn't registered full-time, the country itself could spit him out. And as that thought rooted itself, the plan formed, silent, surgical, fair in its own twisted way. I pulled his record, watched his schedule unfold on the screen, neat and innocent. Then, piece by piece, I dismantled his semester, dropped every class, added every course with a fee. A quiet war waged through keystrokes. No violence, no bruises, just bureaucracy cutting like a blade, and me sealing each change with a calm breath. I didn't tell Lucy, didn't tell Sarah, didn't tell a soul. Revenge whispered best in silence, and I wasn't about to leave fingerprints behind pride. I didn't check his record again for weeks, didn't need to. I knew the system like the back of my hand, and I knew the shock waiting for him would hit like a door slamming shut in a cold hallway. Part of me wondered if I'd gone too far, if righteous anger had drifted into something darker. But then I remembered Sarah shaking on our couch, her voice thin as tissue paper. I remembered bruises whispered through tears, and every doubt quieted like it had never existed at all. Justice wasn't always gentle, sometimes it had teeth. When Tuesday rolled around and Sarah came back from class with wide eyes, she said Jay showed up only to find someone else in his seat. The professor checked the roster, found no Jay, and dismissed him like a ghost who didn't belong. He protested, angry, confused, but the system was bigger than his voice, and then he was gone. He didn't return to that class, and as days passed, his presence faded from campus like chalk washed by rain. Maybe he tried to fight it. Maybe he packed bags and crossed borders. I never checked. Part of revenge is not needing to witness every consequence, just knowing the world shifted because you refused to let cruelty breathe freely. Life moved on. Lucy and I eventually drifted apart, as young hearts sometimes do. Sarah visited less, her life branching in new directions. I didn't chase answers about Jay's fate. Some chapters close quietly, not because they aren't loud, but because the story finishes its sentence without needing our applause. Do I regret it? Sometimes the question taps my mind like rain on glass. But then I remember bruises, fear, a friend trembling. And I choose peace in knowing I didn't raise a fist. I raised a boundary. You don't get to hurt people I care about and walk back to comfort untouched. Play cruel games, lose everything quietly. In the days after everything happened, a strange calm settled over my life. Like the air right after a thunderstorm when the lightning is gone but the world hasn't decided whether to shine or brood again. I kept going to class, kept clocking in at work, carrying the quiet weight of what I'd done inside me like something cold, but justified. I told myself justice had been served, that the universe didn't always hand consequences to cruel people unless someone pushed the first domino. But every now and then, when my hand hovered over the student system keyboard, I could feel a whisper of doubt, like shadows tugging on conscience, asking whether I had crossed a line I could never uncross. Sarah kept coming over, still tender from everything she'd gone through, grief hanging around her like a soft fog. But she laughed again sometimes, quiet little bursts like a flower blooming after frost, and each sound reminded me why I acted, why loyalty sometimes looks like steel instead of comfort. She would talk about feeling free, even though she didn't fully understand why Jay vanished from campus so fast. She thought maybe he dropped out, maybe his pride couldn't survive being seen as the guy who hurt her. I let her believe what brought her peace, never letting the truth slip from behind my steady expression. Sometimes Lucy would glance at me when Sarah spoke, like she suspected something but couldn't place it. There was a sharp intelligence in her eyes I always admired, the kind that noticed when the world tilted even a little. But she never asked, and I never offered. Some secrets don't belong in daylight. I started to see little signs of Sarah getting stronger, her posture straighter, her smile brighter, her voice less afraid of echoing in a room. It felt like watching someone remember their worth in real time, piece by gentle piece, and each small victory made the weight of my decision feel a little less heavy. But at night, when the apartment was quiet and the hum of the refrigerator filled the space where laughter used to be, I'd lie awake thinking about lines, about rules, about the invisible boundary between justice and vengeance. I wondered whether good people stayed good after doing dark things for the right reasons. Still, every time doubt crept in, I remembered the bruise she showed Lucy, the way her voice shook when she said his name, the crack in her spirit he tried to carve deeper, and the fire returned, steady and cold, reminding me that monsters aren't always punished by law. They sometimes fall by quiet hands unseen. College days began to blur again. Textbooks, lectures, microwave noodles, tired mornings, quiet victories. Life has this strange way of acting like nothing extraordinary happened, even when your insides are shifting like tectonic plates beneath calm sidewalks. I moved through routines while carrying a secret sharp as glass. Lucy and I grew distant slowly, not because of the secret, but because sometimes young love is a bridge built with fragile wood. Work schedules, stress, whispered arguments about nothing. We began to drift like boats tied to the same dock, but slowly slipping their knots without anyone pulling. I think sometimes doing something heavy changes you in quiet ways. I carried a hardness in me after that day, a steel thread woven into my softness. Maybe Lucy felt it. Maybe life just moved the way life does, pulling people apart as gently and cruelly as tides take shells from shorelines. Sarah didn't ask about Jay anymore. Weeks passed, then months. She started talking to new classmates, laughing freely, wearing colors brighter than before. And seeing her heal made the shadow in my chest loosen a little more each day, like purpose unraveling after serving its role. Every time she smiled without fear, every time she walked into our apartment with light instead of dread, I felt that silent satisfaction settle again. Not triumph, not cruelty, just the steady hum of knowing I didn't let someone destroy someone sacred in my orbit. I protected her, quietly. Once, in a passing moment at school, I saw a notice about international withdrawals pinned on a bulletin board, a name scribbled at the bottom, faint but familiar. I looked only long enough to confirm the shape meant what I thought it did, then turned away before guilt or pride could speak louder than breath. Some justice happens in courtrooms, some in whispered prayers, and some in quiet corners of school databases when someone refuses to let harm go unanswered. I didn't seek glory or applause. I simply ensured a threat didn't get to walk freely near someone who needed safety more than forgiveness. Life moved forward. Exams came, papers stacked, friendships changed shape. But deep in me, a truth settled. Protecting someone sometimes means stepping into shadows they never see. Not all heroes glow. Some just make sure bruises don't happen again, even if no one knows why peace returned. I didn't regret what I did, not really, but I carried it, the way we carry choices that matter. Heavy, solid, forever stitched into the seams of who we become. And somewhere between quiet nights and campus hallways, I learned that sometimes the strongest kindness isn't gentle at all. Time has a strange way of sanding down even the sharpest memories, turning jagged pain into something smooth enough to carry without bleeding. Months rolled forward, semesters changed, and the world continued spinning like nothing monumental had shifted beneath its surface. But I knew better. Stories don't need witnesses to carve themselves into the bones of the people who lived them. Lucy and I eventually unraveled, slowly and silently, like a thread slipping loose from a sweater no one realized was fraying. Breakups don't always come with shouting. Sometimes they arrive like winter, gentle, inevitable, and cold enough that you don't feel the freeze until you're shivering alone. We hugged goodbye in a whisper of finality and walked different futures. For a while, I questioned everything. Whether my loyalty had turned me into something harder, whether justice or vengeance had guided my fingers that day. But doubt never changed the truth of what happened, and reflection doesn't erase harm already done by someone else. Healing isn't always about forgetting. Sometimes it's about making peace with the fire you lit. Sarah kept flourishing, slowly reclaiming pieces of herself she probably didn't realize she'd lost. She found new friends, new routines, new light in her voice. proof that strength grows from places pain once lived. Watching her step into joy again felt like seeing spring push through winter soil, delicate but unstoppable. We never spoke about Jay. His name evaporated from conversations like smoke dissolving in open air. Sometimes the most powerful closure isn't confrontation, it's silence, distance, and the quiet fading of someone who never deserved space in your life to begin with. His shadow no longer lingered in rooms he once darkened. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of my reflection and see a different man than before. Not necessarily harder, just wiser, aware that protecting someone sometimes demands stepping beyond lines polite society draws. Heroes don't always fight fair, and some victories come without applause or witnesses. I understood then that kindness and strength aren't opposites. You can hold softness in one hand and steel in the other, choosing carefully which one the moment requires. Kindness alone doesn't stop cruelty. Sometimes steel must speak when words fail. And in that balance, I found a new shape of myself. People imagine revenge as fire, explosive, loud, burning everything in sight. But real justice, quiet justice, feels more like ice, controlled, patient, deliberate. Ice carves mountains over time. It shapes without screaming. And in my silence, I carved a boundary that would protect someone who deserved better. Did I ever feel guilt? Yes, in flickers, like shadows brushing past my thoughts. But then I'd remember the bruise on Sarah's back, the fear in her voice, the betrayal in her shaking hands. Some actions earn consequences, even if the world never plans to deliver them. So someone else must. We don't always get to choose the moments that test who we are. We only choose how we respond. And when that moment came, I chose loyalty. I chose protection. I chose to believe that good people sometimes have to walk into shadows to defend the light in someone else's life. Life went on. Graduations, new addresses, new chapters. I never looked Jay up, never tried to trace the rest of his story. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone vanish into their consequences, nameless and irrelevant to the life they once threatened. Sarah eventually moved cities, chasing dreams without fear trailing her heels. We didn't talk as often, but that's the rhythm of life. People drift, not from lack of care, but because growth sometimes sends us down different roads. And that's okay. Not every bond needs forever to matter deeply. Sometimes I sit by a window and watch people pass, wondering how many stories exist behind ordinary faces. Love, loss, anger, healing. The world is full of quiet battles and silent victories no one sees. Mine simply lived in a login screen and a decision that changed someone's future in a single breath. And if I could go back, knowing everything I do now, the doubts, the whispers of conscience, the moral grayness shaking hands with righteousness, I would still press those keys. Because protecting someone you care about is never a mistake. The world is harsh enough without letting cruelty sharpen itself unchecked. In the end, I didn't become a hero or a villain. I became something quieter. Someone who refused to watch pain unfold without acting. Not every battle needs fists. Some are won with knowledge, timing, and a courage that whispers instead of roars. And sometimes, that whisper is enough to change everything. So this is my truth. I protected a friend when she needed someone brave, even if bravery didn't look noble. And I carry that moment not as a burden, but as proof that loyalty can be fierce, justice can be quiet, and love, real love, doesn't stand by and hope. It intervenes, it acts, it fights without fists. In life, not every battle happens in the open, and not every victory shines under bright lights. Sometimes the greatest strength is the quiet kind, the courage to act when no one sees, to stand with someone when they're breaking, to protect without needing praise. This story isn't about revenge. It's about loyalty, about finding steel inside yourself when the world demands it, and choosing to defend those who can't stand alone. And if you ever face that moment, I hope you choose heart before hesitation, and courage before silence. Thank you for listening to my story. Stay kind, stay strong, and protect the ones who trust you, quietly, fiercely, always.